Welcome. Thanks for coming. I have a single message for you. Do not work hard. That's my message. Thank you. Oh, this is going to be a good crowd. Okay, thank you. I'm actually serious. No matter how long you stay here, whether it's 1 year, 15 months, 18, or longer, my advice is the same. I do not want you to work hard. Instead, I want you to work smart. Think about the guy, and we all know people like this, who gets up at 0400, hits the books, goes to classes all day, studies late until the night, wakes up the next day, does the same thing. He pumps himself up with coffee and Snickers bars, his eyes are bloodshot, he looks terrible, and he's having a pretty miserable experience. But everyone around him is going, gee, that guy is such a hard worker. He's so impressive, really works so hard all the time. Let me tell you something. That guy has to work that hard because no one ever taught him how to work smart. He never learned how to study efficiently, learn effectively, and communicate clearly. Wouldn't you rather be the guy or the gal who has a normal routine, who knocks off studying at, say, 1900 hours, gets to have a relaxing dinner with the spouse or partner, or play with the kids, go out on a date if you're single, best not to do that if you're married, go out on a date, play golf. I mean, you're in Monterey, right? A lot of you have been either shot at in Afghanistan or Iraq. You've lived under very stressful conditions. You've seen some horrible things. And now you find yourselves in Monterey. You should be out on the bay, sailing. You should be hanging out on the beach. I mean, do you really want to spend all your time studying here? Especially when you could be spending less time, but learning more and producing better quality work. In the next roughly 40 minutes, I want to share with you some very basic tips about how to work smart. And these tips are going to help you not just here at NPS, but long after you leave here throughout your careers. Whether you ever have to write any kind of action plan, after-action review, a white paper, a full proposal to get funding for something you're working on, or if you just want to get traction on your ideas, get noticed by your superiors, have an impact, then writing clearly and powerfully is an incredibly valuable tool. The reality is, I'm going to recast what the provost just told you in my own way. Power accrues to those who communicate best, whether you realize it or not. And that's not the only source of power, but it is a major one, especially in any organization. I want you to have that power. So, I've divided my talk into 3 parts. You might want to write this down if it helps you to organize your thinking. Part 1, reading actively, on which I'll only spend a few moments, which I'll explain why in a minute. Part 2, researching rigorously, and Part 3, writing powerfully. So again, reading actively, researching rigorously, writing powerfully. The good news is that as you develop those 3 skill sets, you will not only be working smart, you will also be developing and honing your critical thinking skills. Critical thinking just means the ability to challenge your own ideas as well as those of others. To challenge your own ideas as well as those of others. That's critical thinking. And that will stand you in good stead wherever you are. Okay, so let's get down to it. 2 quick points about asking questions. First, it's possible that some of you may have noticed that I am blind. And that means that if you raise your hand to ask a question, your arm will be left hanging for a very long time, okay? So, instead of doing that, what I'd like to ask is that you just shout out, sir, or question, but shout out loudly enough so I can hear you. However, if you can hold your comments to the end, your questions to the end, we will set aside a block of time for Q&A. Second point, every professor will tell you that there is no such thing as a dumb question. If you are thinking it, then others are too. Don't be reluctant to ask. I do want to tell you that, but I also want to tell you something in addition. In the extremely unlikely event that you actually do ask a dumb question, don't worry, because I will give such a wide-ranging, in-depth, and thoughtful response, that you will look like a total genius for having asked such a brilliant question, okay? Good. Very good. All right, let's get down to it. Part 1, reading actively. I'm not actually going to talk about this that much for the following reasons. First, I gave a lecture about 2 or 3 years ago laying out all the practical step-by-step instructions on how to read actively. And you can watch that video. It's available on the NPS intranet, or you could just Google it, Zachary Shore, Graduate School Survival Skills, easy to find, and we can always get you that link from the Writing Center. So if you're interested in how to read actively, that's one place you can go. Another thing you can do is come to a workshop at 1700 hours today. I will be leading a 1-hour workshop where I will walk you through a text and show you exactly how to read at a graduate level. Third way is you could simply make an appointment with a writing tutor at the Writing Center. They will help you get that skill as well. They're not just there for writing, but also teaching you how to read actively. Just to make it clear what I'm talking about, let me ask you, have you ever had this experience? Have you ever been hunched over a book, maybe late at night, you're turning the pages, you hear that inner monologue in your head, it was the best of times, so it's worst times, and suddenly you go, wait a minute, I have no idea what I just read for the last 20 minutes. Okay, your laughter tells me that you may have had this experience. That comes from reading passively, and you must never do that again. What you want to do instead, that's my advice, okay? I would not do this if I were you. It's not helpful. It's an enormous waste of time. Instead, you need to learn a totally different method for reading. We are all, every day, inundated with enormous amounts of information that we have to sift through. And what I want to teach you is a totally different nonlinear method for reading where you're trying to extract the key information. Imagine that you had, think of it this way, you had one of the Boston Marathon bombers in your custody, one of those 2 brothers, right before the bombs went off. Yeah, you might like to know his family background, his childhood stories, and how he came to be a fanatic, but that's not the most important information right now. The most important things are 3 questions. Where did you plant the bombs? When are they set to go off? And how do we defuse them? And by the same token, when you're dealing with a text, you don't have time initially to read through everything. You can't read every word or you will drown. And so you need to ask 3 things. What is the thesis? What is it based on? How do I destroy it? And by destroy, I mean pick apart the logic of the argument. So that's what I try to teach you in the video and in the workshop, and that's what you can learn from your tutors. Save you a lot of time. Okay, let's move on from reading actively to the meat of the matter. Part 2, researching rigorously. I am going to give you just 3 tips that you will want to employ here and after you leave here whenever you're working on a project. Number 1, never begin with your conclusions already drawn. Sounds obvious. You'd be amazed how many people do that here. We always find this common error when people begin any kind of research. They say, I know I can prove that gizmo X can perform function Y. If I just keep trying, I can prove it. Bad way to start, because then you end up fudging your facts and fixing your data. That's not what you want to do. Or I have students come to me every quarter and they say, I want to write a paper on X, and I want to show that blah, 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 blah. They're already off on the wrong start. If you begin thinking you're certain of what the answer is, you've forgotten, you didn't get the memo that says scholarship is about asking questions. We are trying to solve puzzles and figure things out that we didn't know the answer to beforehand. So you've got to start with a question mark, something you honestly don't know, don't understand. I think the best projects are the ones where you are surprised by the answer you find. When you get that surprise, it's going to be engaging to you, to your readers, and it's also a sign that you are truly doing honest research. So go for those surprises. Keep your minds open. Never begin with your conclusions already drawn. All right, tip number 2. You must always link your questions to something larger. You need to realize that we're all working on tiny little pieces of a much bigger puzzle, but you need to be able to tell people what that bigger puzzle is, how your work fits in. If you cannot do that, you might want to consider dropping that question and doing something else, because Why would you want to waste your time on something that's not important? So how do you find out what the link is to something larger? Well, hello, that's what your faculty are here for. That's what professors are here for. Your instructors come to us, ask us. We will guide you. We will tell you, that's a good question to start with, but it's really been thoroughly answered by these people, so here's a better way to start. Okay, your faculty will help guide you. Link your questions to something larger. Now, tip number 3, and here is a much more practical, hands-on technique you can always employ. Compress your questions into 8 words or fewer. Compress your questions into 8 words or fewer. That's hard to do. It's an intellectual exercise, but it has 2 very important benefits. One, it communicates clearly to others that you know exactly what you're working on. So when someone asks you, what is it you're doing? You can rattle off in 8 words or fewer, boom, and then they say, gee, this lady's really sharp, or this guy really knows what he's doing, he's totally focused. But the second important benefit is that it actually keeps you focused with laser-like intensity on your subject. And as you research and as you write, especially as you write, you have that 8-word or fewer question in your mind at the tip of your tongue, and you can be asking yourself, as I write each paragraph, is this really helping to answer that 8-word or fewer question? And if not, cut it out. You're wasting time and space. You don't have that kind of time. So do yourself a favor, cut out the unnecessary, keep that 8-word or fewer question handy, and always make sure that everything you're writing is helping to answer that question. So let's take a look at some examples of how we could take topics drawn from theses across NPS in a variety of fields and see how we can craft an 8-word or shorter question out of it. Dr. Levitt, would you be so kind as to help us out here?
Yes, the first topic is photovoltaic cells in DoD installations in the Middle East.
Okay, and we're going to put that into a simple question. What might it be? These are just examples.
Is solar power viable in DoD installations?
Okay, very crisp, focused. Obviously, you must realize that we're going to expand and elaborate those questions. That'll be the next few paragraphs, but this can be a template that should help you, okay?
Yeah. And the answer, which is your thesis, is, so yes, solar power is viable for DoD installations, but under certain conditions. This is where you move beyond your 8-word or fewer focus question and get into the nuances of research.
If your answer is just yes, it'll be a very short thesis. So we hope that there's something a little bit more to it that you will be fleshing out. Okay, let's take another example.
Topic here is retention prediction models of U.S. military academy graduates.
Very good. This is from our math department, actually.
Yeah. And the question is, how can we predict retention rates?
Good question. Okay. Very simple and succinct.
Yeah. And we have more specifically, can regression techniques accurately predict which military academy grads are most likely to remain in the service?
Okay.
So again, here we've narrowed it down.
Exactly. Okay. I think you're getting the point. Let's just do 2 more.
Okay. Topic is path planning strategies for unmanned ground vehicle networks.
Some people are thinking, but I don't work on unmanned ground vehicles, and why is this relevant to me? I hope you're getting the idea that these are principles you're trying to extract and show how you can take whatever you're working on and compress it into that 8-word or fewer question. Okay?
So the question here is, can a foundational mobility estimation algorithm improve performance?
So we took what was actually a very cumbersome topic. There's a lot there, and compressed it down. And again, the idea is to keep you focused. Okay, let's do one more.
Okay, this topic is border raids against insurgent sanctuaries.
So here's from our friends in Special Forces. They have a problem here. You've got someone operating in country A and some people that are operating in neighboring country B and a sanctuary, and you want to disrupt their activities. So there are often political costs to that. Let's see what we get here.
The larger question then becomes, can political costs of border raids be minimized? That's what you'll be investigating.
And then we can flesh it out.
More specifically, can historical case studies of past border raids and their political consequences offer lessons for contemporary affairs? I propose an analysis of X, Y, and Z cases with a particular focus on blah, 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 blah.
Now, that blah, blah, blah actually turns out to be very important because that's where you bring in your true added value. Remember I said that we're always tackling a smaller part of a bigger puzzle. And in that blah, blah, blah part of your template, and again, this is just one model. You don't have to use exactly this. This is something that can really help keep you focused in whatever you're writing. So that blah, blah, blah is where you say, very specifically, I'm going to do this particular angle on that project. Okay, good. One other thing I want you to know, if you're writing a master's thesis or a PhD, you can use the same method for each chapter of that thesis, whereby each chapter has its own 8-word or fewer question, and that drives the chapter, makes it much easier to get through. So, for example, let me give you an example from my own dissertation, which was on the topic of foreign policy decision-making in Nazi Germany. I compressed it down to one meta-question for the whole dissertation: how did Hitler make decisions? Then I'd have my more fleshed-out paragraph more specifically: how did Hitler's regime make foreign policy decisions in pre-war Nazi Germany, 1933 to 39, so very specific. Then each chapter has its own smaller 8-word question, such as, why did Hitler align with Poland? Why did Hitler remilitarize the Rhineland? How did domestic terror affect the diplomats? Always I was able to ask, is what I'm writing in this chapter helping to answer that question? If yes, keep going, we'll be right on target. And the answers to all of those questions combined help to answer the bigger meta question: how did Hitler make decisions, or whatever it might be? How do we predict retention of West Point grads, and so on? Okay, then you want to have a conclusion, a thesis, your main argument. That too, you should be able to compress into a single sentence. This does not need to be 8 words or fewer, but you should be able to at least get it down to a single sentence. For the same reasons I've described: keeps you focused and communicates clearly what you're doing. In the Hitler case, for me, it was Hitler's power to make informed decisions was limited by the very system he created. Let me give you another example from the book I'm working on right now, and I'm going to tell you about this for a slightly different reason, which I will reveal in a moment. So the book is about how leaders learn to think like their enemies. It's called A Sense of the Enemy. And the question, for the first time in my life, I've actually gotten it down to just 4 words. And those 4 words are, what aids strategic empathy? Well, what's strategic empathy? Good, so then I have to explain it. That's many paragraphs right there, trying to explain to people what is this concept I'm offering. Of course, I would have a 1-sentence, nutshell explanation of it. Strategic empathy is the ability to discern an enemy's underlying drivers and constraints. Once you have that, you can explain it in a great deal more. Then a conclusion, what I came to in this project, was the answer, which I also try to put in a single sentence. Here it is. One key to strategic empathy comes not from the enemy's pattern of past behavior, but from his behavior at pattern breaks. So then you ask, well, what are pattern breaks? Great. Now I have a whole subsection called What are Pattern Breaks? And I can outline and explain what all these are, what are meaningful versus meaningless pattern breaks, and so on. The reason I've told you all of this is to tell you something else. People often ask, how do I fill the white space? How do I start by looking at a blank screen and end up with something really meaty? How do I know what to write? My answer here is spring load your big ideas. And by that, I mean, imagine as a metaphor that you've got a really good idea you've come to, and you're taking it like a coil, and you're compressing it, compacting it down to these little nuggets I've been describing. That coil then has a lot of tension, tremendous potential energy, and you are then going to see, hey, it's asking me to elaborate and expand on that. You're setting yourself up for something to write and explain. So if it's a good question, if it's meaningful, then the paper almost writes itself. Okay, right, we wish it were that easy. It never is, but it's setting you up for logical next steps. So that's one bit of advice I can give. Spring load your big ideas. Okay. And when you say, well, how do I answer the question that I gave in a single sentence, my thesis, your entire paper or your essay or your thesis, that is the explanation of and the proof of your larger argument. If you want more, I've given you a lot of, if this were show and tell, I've given you a lot of tell. If you want more show, I will lead a workshop on this, an hour-long workshop in August, and I'll repeat the same workshop the next day. If you didn't get into the first, if you want it, I will walk you through more of this process, how you come to pick a topic, how you figure out its importance and link it to something larger, how you craft that 8-word or fewer research question no matter what your topic is, and how you execute the process. So if you're interested, please let us know, sign up through the Writing Center, and you can check out that workshop called Critical Thinking. Okay, let us now turn to part 3 on writing powerfully. And again, the kind of power I'm talking about is the power to persuade, the power to influence, and to have an impact, and advance your careers. 1 second. Okay, I'm going to say that there are 3 elements you want in your writing. You want to strive for these 3 things. Concision, clarity, and analytical rigor. Concision, I'll define each of them in turn. So concision, meaning being concise, I would define as the fewest words necessary to express your ideas. The fewest words necessary to express your ideas. Notice that I did not say the fewest words possible. You can always reduce things down to nothing, maybe just a symbol, like the artist formerly known as Prince, but that is not what you want to do for effective communication. So instead, you want the fewest words necessary to express your idea, and we'll get some examples in a moment. Clarity. Clarity I would define as, very simply, making your ideas easily understandable to others. Making your ideas easily understandable to others. It's normally going to be clear in your head, at least we hope it is. If it's not, you're not ready to write yet. Go back into the research phase. If you are ready to write and you have good ideas, they'll be possibly clear to you, but not necessarily clear to others. So that's what we're striving for. That's what the writing tutors can help with. One more thing, analytical rigor. And this is the lipstick on a pig problem. You can't put lipstick on a pig, call it a fashion model, and expect people to buy it. Same is true here. If you have weak ideas, then there's really not much that great writing can do for you. But if you have good ideas and good writing, think of the possibilities. Then you can really make an impact. So that's what we're striving for, those 3 elements. Now let me offer you 3 tips on how to get there, how to get concision, clarity, and analytical rigor. Number 1, get to the point. Last week I ran into the chair of the math department. Wonderful guy. I told him I was giving this talk. He said, if you can only tell them one thing, tell them to get to the point. If the chairman of the math department thinks that your writing needs this, you need this, okay? It's so important and so infrequent in student writing, and I've been here for 7 years, and I've read work from across the university. It's so infrequent that I really need to belabor this point, and so I've created an example, an analogy that I think will make this clear to you that in a way that you will remember. Imagine that you and I go out for drinks, and the bartender says to me, "What'll it be?" And I say, "Scotch on the rocks." And the bartender turns to you and says, "And what will you have?" And you say, "Throughout history, man has enjoyed a variety of libations. The ancient nomadic peoples of outer Mongolia have been known to enjoy fermented yak's milk, whereas the reindeer-herding people of the Siberian steppe, oh God, what do you want to drink? Just get to the bloody point." This is what we are needing you to do. It's what everyone has to do in their writing. Get to the point. So, You have to think, what is it like for your professors who have to read hundreds of papers of rambling sentences and paragraphs that go nowhere, and we just are tortured by this? I mean, there has to be something in the Geneva Convention about this. Okay? This is inhumane treatment of professors of war. If you would be so kind, I would like you to take this simple one-sentence pledge with me right now. If you would raise your right hand and please repeat after me. From now on, I will get to the bloody point. Thank you. Okay, good. Let's now take a look at a written example of someone who had great difficulty getting to the bloody point and how we can make it better. That someone, by the way, is I. I wrote this sentence, but it is indicative of the kinds of writing we often experience. Okay, Dr. Levitt.
Okay. Rambling, horrible opening. In this paper, it will be argued that suboptimal somnolence negatively corresponds to physical and emotional well-being, which in turn elevates the probability of self-harm among military personnel.
I'm sorry, I drifted for a moment. What was it? Okay, right.
Shall I read it again?
No, please don't. Please, spare us. Okay. So, first of all, it's rambling. What else is wrong with this sentence? Anybody want to just shout out some observation you can make about this? Passive voice, very good. We're going to get to that next. Excellent. Anything else? What is somnolence? Okay, we're using a word people don't know. It's sleepiness. Okay, good. Anything else? Okay, we don't even have a conclusion. We don't know what this means. How could we craft a better sentence? Anybody want to take a stab at recrafting this incredibly convoluted thing into something straightforward that gets to the point? Anybody want to tackle it? Sleep is important. Very good. Okay. Now, remember I said concision is using the fewest words necessary, not fewest words possible. That doesn't completely convey the meaning or the idea here, but we're on the right track. That was great, very concise. Anybody else want to give us something that would still express the meaning? Excellent. People that have trouble sleeping are more likely to commit suicide. Very good. I'm going to take that and rework it a tiny bit. Dr. Levitt?
Better opening. Poor sleep is a risk factor for suicide.
Good. Now, you could elaborate that, flesh it out, make more sense of it. Okay, I think we get the idea here. We'll get a little more of that when we do some more examples of different things. Tip number 2, use the active voice. We all know that you should do this, and yet we just don't do it. What is the difference? Active voice, I throw the ball. Passive voice, the ball was thrown by me. Active voice, subject, verb, object. Very simple, clear, straightforward construction. Passive voice has a tendency to deaden your writing and deaden the reader. It actually can cause the reader to pass out. They should rename it the pass-out voice instead of the passive voice, okay? All right. Tip number 3. Craft a bold opening. Craft a bold opening. Now, let me give you one quick example from a really nice essay by George Orwell, Shooting an Elephant. Many of you have probably read about imperialism. It opens with this sentence. In Malmain, in Lower Burma, I was hated by large numbers of people. The only time in my life that I was ever important enough for this to happen to me. Nice sentence. Draws you in, it hooks you, it engages you. I am not telling you you have to write like George Orwell. What I am telling you is that crafting a bold opening should not be undervalued. You might be thinking, is this guy nuts? I mean, of all the, I may be, but that's aside from the point. If this guy only has a few minutes to talk to us about good writing, and he's only going to give us 3 main tips about it, why would he pick as a third one, craft a bold opening? Is it really that important? Well, how important do you think it is to make a good first impression? It's actually much more important in good writing. There are 2 reasons why. First, when you take the time to really craft and construct a strong, powerful opening, it frames the experience for your reader. And everything that comes after that is filtered through that frame. I'm telling you, it's psychological, as many things are, especially in this realm. So you are shaping that experience for the reader is saying, wait a minute, this is starting out really well. I'll bet it's going to be really good. Obviously now, back to the lipstick on a pig problem, if your ideas are weak, that's not going to help you. But if your ideas are good, and you've started with a strong opening, think of the possibilities. But there's actually a much more important, arguably more important reason for starting with a bold, well-constructed opening. It's for you. Every time you open that document, whatever you're working on, this will be the first thing you see. And it'll be impressive. And you will be excited about what you're writing. And you'll say, wait a minute, this actually is really good. And this could be a great project. And you will be inspired to work even better. You have raised the bar on your own writing at the very start. And you're going to say, I need to make the rest of it this good, or at least as good, if not better. And so you will bring passion to the page. You will get excited about what you're working on. Let's face it, so much of writing is full of psychological hang-ups, right? Even the people who make their living as writers are tortured by a lot of these. Oh, what if it's no good? What if no one likes it? What if it doesn't make sense? Maybe I should procrastinate and rearrange my sock drawer instead. I come up with all these reasons. What am I going to do? How do I fill the white space? Yada, yada, yada. You have a strong, bold opening, and you will be feeling good about your work, and that energy will carry you through the whole process. Don't underestimate the value of this. Okay, let's now take a look at two more examples of some paragraphs that were murky and turgid, and let's see how we can combine all three of these things, getting to the point, using the active voice, and crafting a bold opening. Okay, Dr. Levitt, hit us with one.
Okay. Murky conclusion. This is not where you want to go. In the future, compact nuclear reactors could prove viable as alternatives to current reactors, particularly through use of lead-cooled reactors by using lead that is enriched in radiogenic lead.
Nice sigh. Thank you for that. Very dramatic.
In this thesis, the natural variation of lead isotopic content was geochemically investigated to determine if there are favorable naturally occurring lead sources. Artificial isotope separation of lead is cost prohibitive. It was found that natural lead sources high in lead-208 and low in lead-204 could lead to a reduction in the required core enrichment of up to 1%.
Okay, let me make a quick disclaimer here. This is from a real thesis. It didn't look at all like this. It was a wonderful thesis. I took it and I corrupted it. So I hope that person, if they ever find out that I used this, is not offended. Know that they did a great job. I have made it intentionally bad, but bad in a way that we typically see. So now we have to figure out what's wrong with it and how do we make it better. All right, somebody, take a stab at it. What's the first problem here? Anybody want to shout out?
Way too much.
Way too much, okay. So it's too fat, good, okay.
Repetition.
What?
Repetition.
Too repetitive, exactly. Totally repetitive. You have to keep a careful track on not using the same major words, I'd say more than twice in a paragraph, if you can avoid it. Okay, what else?
Seems like we're presenting new ideas.
Say it again.
Seems like we're presenting new ideas.
Presenting new ideas in the conclusion. Okay, that's possible. All right. What else? Anything else? Only one comma, is that what you said? Okay, very good. So serious punctuation problems, making it much harder for the reader. Okay, I think we could go on.
And I admit I added that one in.
Well done, Dr. Levitt. Okay, let's take a
Couldn't
look
help myself.
at a possible revision that would make this stronger.
Okay. Clear conclusion might read, lead-cooled fast reactors have great potential for future compact nuclear power systems, but they can be refined and improved. We found that we could increase their power and reduce their physical size by using sources of lead that are naturally enriched in certain isotopes. Because artificial isotope separation of lead is cost prohibitive, we could use natural lead sources that are high in lead-208 and low in lead-204.
Okay, now, what's different about this? What's better? Maybe it's not the greatest paragraph ever written. Okay, I take responsibility, I did that, but I reworked it as I could. Tell me what you think is improved here. Starts with a subject. Okay,
Excellent.
anything else? Not as specific?
You presented all your information
Right.
in the prior summarizing
Right. We've synthesized. Exactly right. Very good. Okay. Other things? We got rid of some of the repetition. Active voice. Excellent. Very good. Anything else? More positive. Very good. Okay. We've got a tone issue going on. Good. Dr. Levitt, could you read me the first
Yeah.
part of that first sentence one more time?
Yes. Of the clearer or murky?
Of that clearer
Okay.
paragraph.
Lead-cooled fast reactors have great potential for future compact nuclear power systems.
Stop. So you're setting up here. We've got something good that could happen, but there's a problem. Tell us right away in that first sentence, here's the hope, but here's the problem. And then comes the problem, but we need to do this. And then we say, okay, now we've figured out we can do this. Here's the way, and now I'm going to tell you how. Okay. I think we get that. Sorry, Darla?
And one point to make here is that brevity of sentences does not necessarily make a good sentence,
Oh.
number of words. In the first paragraph, the murky conclusion, we have the shortest sentence on this page is artificial isotope separation of lead is cost prohibitive. Boring, but it is the shortest sentence up there. The clear, you can still be clear and use more words in a sentence. We have fewer sentences in the clearer conclusion. They're longer, but they have punctuation, proper punctuation, and linking or clauses that naturally fit together, can be woven together to make cogent thought.
That lady gets an A+. Okay. What we're saying is, in a nutshell, clarity is more important than concision. Sometimes concision, being brief, has to be sacrificed on the altar of clarity. Both are important. If you can get both clarity and concision, you're in good shape. Okay, I think we have one more example. Is that right?
Yeah,
That's the last one.
This one. Okay, here we're looking at what is the full value of alliances. And this might be an essay question you get, or if you're taking comps, a comprehensive exam question. Weak opening that someone might write would be, various historical examples are studied to understand the value of alliances. It is of my opinion that alliances are an important part of diplomacy, but due to fluctuating variables, alliances may not be enough to counter a stronger nation. Does this create an image in your head
Okay.
of what is being talked about?
Thoughts on problems here? Qualifier. It's kind of weak. It's basically wishy-washy. Very good. Okay, anything else? What? Sorry? Okay, I would say it's all right to use a first-person pronoun. That's a matter of taste. Sometimes it could be more powerful, more effective. Not so effective here, but okay, good. Over there we had something? Passive voice again. Okay, good, we're on it. What? Say again? Run on. Okay, good. Okay, a lot of problems here. How could we make this better? Any thoughts on what we might do? Start with a better question. Okay. All right. An essay question wouldn't really be this vague. It would be a lot more specific. But okay, let's say you had to tackle this. What else could you do? Any thoughts?
Don't.
Very good. Okay, a little more specificity. Okay, let's see how we could rework this. Dr. Levitt.
Okay.
Hit us with
Stronger
it.
opening might be, alliances strengthen nations, but they cannot ensure victory in war. Nonetheless, when alliances are thoughtfully constructed, they provide nations with X, Y, and Z, each of which has proved immensely useful to success.
Okay, not perfect, but we're trying to retain the person's idea here. The X, Y, and Z could be the very concrete specifics that you need. There, by the way, is an example of your spring-loaded idea at the start. That's then begging you to say, okay, well, what are X, Y, and Z? You might have a section on each. It's setting you up for success. So one of the things you should be seeing here is brevity is key, but it's not everything. Clarity is more important than concision, although many times you're going to say, man, this is just too fat. We got to take it to the chop shop. There's too much fat on that bone. You got to trim it down and make it shine. Okay, let me take us to some final concluding remarks. Wrap this up. I told you at the beginning that I did not want you to work hard. Instead, I wanted you to work smart. What I did not tell you at that time, I'll tell you now, is that working smart can be hard in the beginning. But as you improve these techniques, as you come to the Writing Center and exploit what we've created for you, use it to your best advantage, as you work on these techniques, you will get faster, you will get more efficient, and you will simultaneously hone your critical thinking skills. But more than that, you will be creating a lot more free time for yourselves. Your work will be better, you'll feel better about things, you'll be able to spend more time enjoying yourselves here and elsewhere, which you should do, because you have absolutely earned it. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your time.